sat with a leader. I never called Senator Byrd Senator. I always called him leader. When I sat with a leader, I could see that look in his face, and he said, Joe, you sure you're making the right decision giving up the Senate for vice president? Because as the senators know, he revered the Senate. As Danny Inouye said going into the chamber when we were going in to honor your father, yesterday we walked in together. He said, you know, Joe, had you stayed, you'd be number two. I'm still number two, Danny. I'm still number two. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, yesterday I had the opportunity to pay my respects to Leader Byrd as he lay in repose in the Senate chamber. I met the family then and again today, and the last time that happened was 50 years ago. The last time that that chamber I revere served as a resting place for anyone was 50 years ago. But although I and my colleagues behind me revere the Senate, Robert C. Byrd elevated the Senate. Other great men and their families would have chosen for them to lay in state in the rotunda. But Bob Byrd, his family chose to lay in state in the Senate chamber. And to me, this is completely appropriate, having served with them for 36 plus years. For the Senate chamber was Robert C. Byrd's cathedral. The Senate chamber was his cathedral, and West Virginia was his heaven. And there's not a lot of hyperbole in that. Every person in the Senate, as my colleagues behind you can tell you, brings something special about them. I'll never forget having privately criticized a senator when I was there the first year. I was sitting with the previous leader, Senator Mansfield, who was an incredible guy. And he told me that, he said, why are you upset? And I told him about a particular senator railing against something I thought was very worthy, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And he went on to tell me that every member of the Senate represented something in the eyes of their state that was special and represented a piece of their state. Well, if there was ever a senator who was the embodiment of his state, if there was ever a senator who in fact reflected his state, it was Robert C. Byrd. The fact of the matter is, the pick of the banjo, the sweet sound of the fiddle, ramp dinners in the spring, country fairs in the summer, the beauty of the laurels in the mountain, the rush of the rapids through the valleys. These things not only describe West Virginia, but from an outsider's point of view, who's been here many times at the invitation of Jennings Randolph and Robert C. Byrd, it seems to me they define a way of life.
In the primaries this year, they have things they want from you, and one of them is a black woman running mate. What do you say to them?
What I say to them is that I'm not acknowledging anybody who is being considered, but I guarantee there are multiple black women being considered. Multiple.
Charlemagne had a follow-up question, but got interrupted by someone off camera saying their time was up. The radio host instead invited Biden to come back, but Joe's response was off-putting.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
The comment
earliest years in the Senate when he strongly opposed mandatory school busing. It was designed to achieve integration and a more equitable education. It was the mid-1970s. Biden favored desegregation, but not through busing. What's less known is how he followed the lead of some of the Senate's most fervent segregationists. In a series of never-before-published letters reviewed by CNN, the strength of Biden's opposition to busing comes into sharper focus. On March 25, 1977, Biden wrote, "My bill strikes at the heart of the injustice of court-ordered busing. It prohibits the federal courts from disrupting our educational system." Biden sought and received support from Mississippi Senator James Eastland, the Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee and a leading symbol of Southern resistance to desegregation.
In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. So,
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids. Black.
Direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day.
Claiming to have been arrested trying to visit Nelson Mandela.
This day, 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting you. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
You now say you weren't arrested and it didn't happen in Soweto. You were at the airport in Johannesburg and you were stopped from going through the door for blacks. I guess the question is, were you confused or were you just trying to embellish a story?
Offer the chance to run with Biden.